Thank you so much, Ambassador Roz, and it's a great privilege for me to be back here at the United Nations. I want to thank you and the permanent mission of Afghanistan, and please extend our appreciation to First Lady Ghani for those incredible remarks. I also want to thank the permanent mission of the United Kingdom and Ambassador Pierce, and the Georgetown Institute for Women, Peace, and Security, and Ambassador Revere for convening this discussion and for coming together to co-chair the group of friends of women in Afghanistan. As the topic of today's discussion suggests, we are indeed at a critical moment for Afghan women. 25 years ago this year, women from 189 countries in all walks of life came together to Beijing under the auspices of the United Nations to declare with one voice that human rights are women's rights and women's rights are human rights. Now, those words were much more than a statement of principles. They were intended to be and became a call to action. The Platform for Action adopted in Beijing became the precursor to Security Council Resolution 1325, which informs our work to this day. Since then, generations of women have answered that call and dedicated their lives to the great unfinished business of the 21st century, expanding the rights, opportunities, and full participation of women and girls. Now, over the decades, there have been times when it seemed like that great unfinished business of the 21st century was even more unfinished than we thought. But through all the setbacks and struggles, we have seen again and again that women are agents of change, makers of peace, and drivers of progress. Along the way, many of you in this room have helped build a compelling evidence-based case to support what we knew all along, that encouraging women's participation is not only the right thing to do, it is the strategic and necessary thing to do for peace, prosperity, and security. You know the studies that show when women are at the negotiating table, parties are more likely not only to reach a peace agreement, but to keep it. Agreements are less likely to fail and more likely to last if women are included at the beginning. When women participate in a peace process, they bring together coalitions and help to build consensus. They also often shine a light on issues of human rights, transitional justice, national reconciliation, and economic renewal that can often be overlooked. We also know that women's rights and physical safety are often the first targets of extremists and authoritarians. Women are often the first to spot conflict. When governments fail to listen to women, they miss out on their vital insights about what's actually happening on the ground, in villages, in the countryside, in cities. Now, that's true in every corner of the world, but few places offer a clearer case study than Afghanistan does. I agree with the ambassador, with the First Lady. There is understandably a deep hunger to end the long war in Afghanistan. Over the last 18 years, the international community has invested in assistance to help Afghanistan build their political, social, and economic institutions. American soldiers, the Allied soldiers, Afghans all, have risked their lives and safety. And Afghans from every walk of life have made it clear they want peace and they want an end to violence and casualties. Yet it is difficult to have an agreement when you leave out the government of the country that you are expecting to uphold and live under that agreement. And it's difficult to sustain an agreement if you leave out half the population in forging it. UN Secretary General Guterres recently gave a speech on women and power that is a must-read. In it, he said, trillions of dollars are spent every year on peace and security, but we should be asking, whose peace, whose security? As First Lady, as Senator, as Secretary of State, I spoke out about the horrors the Taliban perpetrated against Afghan women and girls when they were in power. In fact, I was just reminded by Ambassador Revere, who was my chief of staff in the White House, that I actually received a letter from the Taliban in the late 90s telling me that I was absolutely wrong about everything that was happening in Afghanistan, and I should definitely come and see for myself. Well, I came after they were gone, not while they were there. And it is clear that Afghan women today are rightly afraid not just for their rights and the Constitution that was written to protect them, but literally afraid that the gains they have made with all of our help will be washed away in a rush to achieve a peace that will not hold anyway. This is not just morally wrong. This is dangerous. Dangerous to every country represented here. We must not allow a reign of terror against women and girls. The women of Afghanistan have come too far to be excluded from the negotiating table while their rights are being stripped away. But it also is true we cannot allow that to happen to Afghan women and girls because there is a direct correlation with what will happen in the country and the region and indeed the world because of that. Going forward, there are 4 things that need to happen. First, we should all agree that the Afghan government must be brought into the discussion. We all must remain diplomatically engaged and committed to pushing forward an inclusive intra-Afghan process, one that allows not only the Afghan government, but the Afghan civil society that has been created against such odds over the last years to be represented at the peace table. We need to enable communication to the negotiators from the broader society whose lives and futures are at stake. Look, I know how difficult this has been. From the very beginning, the Taliban said they would not talk to the Afghan government. But we must simply not accede to those wishes, leaving the Afghan government on the hook. Second, troop withdrawals must be conditioned on the Taliban keeping their word. The troops on the ground remain an important lever to persuade the Taliban to end the violence. Our goal has long been to ensure that the Taliban would cease hostilities and violence, agree to abide by the Afghan Constitution and the laws that have been enacted by the Parliament of Afghanistan. The Taliban must prove that they understand and respect the significant changes that have occurred in Afghan society and demonstrate that they are willing to abide by the Constitution and give up violence and go forward in a peaceful political process. Third, our long-term engagement with Afghanistan should not be measured by troop presence alone. We cannot forget the entire country simply because the conflict has ended. We made that mistake before. Let's make a commitment that we will bring to bear all elements of civilian power, development, diplomacy, democracy, to help the Afghan people to pursue the better future they deserve. Fourth, women must be included and women's rights respected as part of any peace negotiation in Afghanistan. Women are essential to combating corruption, building economic growth, and ensuring the longevity of any agreement that is reached. If women are sidelined, the prospects for sustainable peace are slim. If society is torn apart and women pushed to the margins, it is more likely that terrorists will find a haven. There can be no sustainable peace without women's participation and rights. Over the last year, women have mobilized to ensure that their rights are not negotiated away. And according to the best surveys we have access to, the majority of Afghans stand with their women and their desire to have their rights respected. 65% of Afghan citizens say they are not willing to abandon women's education or their right to work outside the home. Let's remember, under the Taliban's rule, women and girls in Afghanistan were prohibited not only from going to school, not only from working outside the home, but from going outside the home without a male guardian, even if it was their young child who happened to be a son. And look at where we are today. More than 3.5 million girls are in school. 100,000 women are enrolled in college. Afghan women have held important positions and do so today within the government. They are members of parliament, ministers, and judges. And if you have not had the opportunity to meet those with whom I am sitting or others, please take that opportunity. Hear from them directly about what is at stake in these negotiations. The women of Afghanistan have made profound contributions to their country in reconstruction and development. They've used their voices and influence to support a moderate Afghanistan, to serve as a bulwark against the return to extremism. They've come too far, they've worked too hard, they have sacrificed too much to be excluded from the negotiating table while their rights are stripped away. And let's not look at this just in isolation. These are perilous times for our world. Nationalism, tribalism, authoritarianism are on the rise. Technology is proving to be a double-edged sword, capable of carrying open minds and democratic values to oppressed people, but also giving authoritarians the tools they seek to tighten control. And we're in the midst of a global refugee crisis that is accelerated by the climate crisis, economic injustice, and violent extremism. And in the midst of all this tumult, there are so many women across the world who are proving to be beacons of hope, doing the hard, essential work of attempting to obtain and even reinvigorating democracies. They are standing up to human rights abuses. They are exposing corruption. They are speaking the truth to power. They are taking on incredible challenges, often in the face of the cruelest, most violent resistance imaginable. I've said for a long time, and I believe more fiercely than ever today, that global progress depends on the progress of women and girls. Whether it's ending a conflict, growing an economy, rebuilding a society, no country ever could, but today, no country must ever exclude half its population. Valerie Hudson, a professor at Texas A&M University, recently summed it up in a recent New York Times op-ed that I recommend to you. What you do to your women, you do to your nation. So let me say this to the women of Afghanistan, and particularly to the young women and the girls, many of whom I've had the great delight of meeting over the years. No matter what happens, know that you have friends and supporters around the world who will stand with you, who will speak out for you, who will be there during the hard times. We will not forget what you have sacrificed over all this time. We will not avert our gaze, and we will not be silent. There is no going back, no matter how much some would hope there could be. So we will keep going together. Through war or peace, tyranny or freedom, we will keep going. And I'm very grateful that once again, the UN is shining this spotlight on this critical nation and the people who deserve to have the future they have fought for and that we have supported thus far. So here's to all the work ahead, Ambassador. Thank you.